Hey, folks, welcome to another episode of the Application Security Podcast. This is Chris Romeo, CEO of Security Journey, and today I am flying solo because Robert is traveling this great United States that we both happen to live in. Today we're going to talk about SBOMs, but we're going to talk about SBOMs in the context of an OWASP project called CycloneDX. And so I'm joined by Patrick Dwyer, who is one of the team members on the CycloneDX project. But before we get to that, we're going to ask Patrick about your security origin story, because our listeners literally sit on the edge of their seats waiting to understand where people are coming from in this great big world of application security. So Patrick, I'd love to hear your security origin story.
Yeah, hi Chris, thanks for having me. I guess really it started when I was a child, started getting into computers, started messing around with them. Probably one of the key sort of moments was in high school. Our computer teacher at the time thought his stuff was pretty secure, and he even made a joke, oh, you can't hack the server, give it a go, there's nothing you can do. So of course, by the following day, the server was offline. He wasn't too happy about it. It's threatened, the entire class with, expulsion or whatever. And so I put my hand up and said, hey, no, it was me. It was just me. But you said give it a go. And he sort of stopped right there. And yeah, after that, we had a great relationship, a lot of respect for each other. But it just sort of started really making me think with that sort of mindset of where things can go wrong. And that continued throughout my career. Started off as basically a one-man IT department for a small company. So had to look after everything, network security, servers, all that sort of stuff as well. Then became a software developer by contract, so doing odd 3-month, 6-month, multi-year projects, things like that. That was more just come in and cut some code. But then my next job, I was leading the dev team for a small government organisation and had a lot of stuff we were looking after. And that included our cloud environment, basically everything from woe to go. And at that point, I was like, oh, the stuff that I've been interested in all this time, I really need to get up to speed on it, because I'm now responsible for this stuff. And if it gets popped, it's my fault or my problem. So that's where I really got into AppSec.
Very cool. So now I'm curious, was your handle in high school Little Bobby Tables?
No, it wasn't that.
Everybody's got to have seen that.
Yeah.
Is it XKCD? We'll put the link in the show.
I love it.
But it's a classic one too, and I still laugh whenever I see it. It's like, and someone will kick it out on social media every 6 months or so and bring it back into the forefront. Yeah. So you basically you kind of started in IT, did some development, and then made your way to security. So kind of had a chance to experience a little bit of everything. So from the IT side, I'm guessing you were doing some administration, and then you're coding, and then you're making your transition into security. So having that strong foundation of, the things that you're going to be discussing with people from a security perspective, you've got some background in all of those things.
Yeah, pretty good breadth of knowledge. It's been quite good.
Awesome. So I want to transition into talking about CycloneDX, but I'm going to ask a really simple question first, because I'm not going to assume that our audience all knows what a CycloneDX even is or what it is. And so I'm going to go really simple with the first question and just say, can you just give us some details and some explanation about what is CycloneDX?
So CycloneDX is a bill of materials standard and associated tooling. And the way we build software has changed. We grab all these third-party components and bundle them into our software. And so the sort of traditional IT asset management of these are the applications we have doesn't really go deep enough anymore, because we've got all these other third-party components in them. So it's just a way of understanding what's inside the box, a bit like the food label that lists the ingredients of what goes into your food. It's a pretty basic analogy, and we don't build software the way we build, put together food, but it's similar to that.
Okay. And so where did the name come from then of CycloneDX? Like it's an interesting name, one of the most interesting names, I think, in all the OWASP projects. I mean, you've got Top 10, ASVS, you got things like that, but CycloneDX sounds like a pretty powerful name.
Yeah, it's so the cyclone part of it is a reference to circular dependencies and the problems they can cause you when you're building software. And the DX part is a bit of a nod to another format called SPDX.
So it's kind of like so it's like a hybrid, or so SPDX and CycloneDX are not the same standard, are they?
No, they're different.
Different in some way. So are these? So we've got basically two competing standards in SBOM right now, or is there more than two? Are there more that I'm not aware of?
There's certainly more than two formats, but there's two main ones that have seen sort of widespread adoption. SPDX traditionally has come at it from the open source software license compliance sort of perspective, whereas CycloneDX come in from the security perspective.
Okay. So I guess what was the need when this project was started? Like, why did CycloneDX come into existence?
Yeah, so there's a guy, Steve Springett. He had a project called Dependency Track, and he was basically trying to come at the same sort of problems that you use SCA for, but a slightly different way. SCA tools traditionally, they're about identifying risk in software, and they look at evidence and things like that to try and figure out what could be in there and what vulnerabilities could be in there. But if you're building software, you should know exactly what is going into it. And so he was tackling it from all right, well, these are the actual components we've got in our software, and we'll go from there. And at the time, there wasn't really anything useful for feeding that information into a tool like Dependency Track. And so he sort of started the Dependency Track stage and then realized, no, hang on, we need a bill of materials format to collect this information and feed in.
So when I think about all these pieces working together, this has really got my brain kind of spinning around a little bit. So I have software composition analysis. This is a tool that will, I can run it in a build pipeline. It tells me, and even sometimes breaks the build if there's some type of high risk vulnerability that exists inside of my application. I have CycloneDX, which is going to create a software bill of materials and then perhaps be imported into some other system that's going to aggregate all those things together for me. I guess the $1 million question is CycloneDX a replacement for SCA, or is it complementary to SCA in some way?
I think it's complementary. It's particularly useful because it's a standard format. You can generate them for different ecosystems, like different package ecosystems, share that information between different tools and automation. And yeah, that's really where the value comes from, where you're sharing this information between different processes.
And so they have kind of different functions then. So I wouldn't use CycloneDX in a build pipeline then, or would I use it in a build pipeline?
You would. So okay. you create your bill of materials as part of the build process, and then you can do analysis on what's inside your software, similar to what SCA tools do. Known vulnerabilities, things like that. But it gives you a much bigger picture of your supply chain.
Okay. So do I still run my SCA tool in that same pipeline then? Or do I just run my CycloneDX?
Well, it depends on what you want to do.
So is there so there is potentially some duplication of effort though if I'm running both of them. Or I guess they could be a check and balance to each other.
Yeah.
You have multiple layers of tooling.
I know there's, SCA tools generally are pretty good, but sometimes the accuracy of what the components are isn't quite 100%. And so there's certainly some value in doing both.
I mean, one of the things you hear people complaining about with software supply chain related tooling is like SCA tools are not as good at determining if you're using a piece of code. Like, are you actually using a vulnerable piece of that library? And so SBOM's not going to help me from that perspective, though, right? It's not going to know. It's just a manifest of everything that's in there. It's not helping me laser focus. I don't really know if that piece of code is being called like in a vulnerable way, for example.
Well, there is some tooling there which generates a runtime bomb. So what's the components that we're using, like not just what's actually packaged in the software, but what's actually being invoked as well.
Oh, so that's part of CycloneDX?
That's a third-party product that
Okay,
uses
that does that
CycloneDX
type of thing.
format. Yeah.
Okay, uses CycloneDX format to get to that level. Okay, but it still relies on the standard format that the OWASP project has put forth to the industry.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So let's back up for a second. I probably got too excited about CycloneDX and dove in too quickly here. Let's kind of pull back up to the 10,000-foot view and let's just think about everybody's thinking about software supply chain, whether you're a CISO, whether you're an AppSec person, or even just a developer who maybe doesn't have security in their title or security is their primary focus. I feel like everybody's heard about the news stories about, SolarWinds and CodeCov and all the things that have the big, and it seems like there's an NPM supply chain related issue once every week now, that hits the news. So I feel like people they're hearing about it, but I'm just curious to get your take on, what is the value that CycloneDX provides to the bigger software supply chain problem?
I see it as an enabler. So by itself, it doesn't actually do very much. What we're talking about is asset inventory. But if you've got that across all of your software portfolio, that lets you do some pretty cool stuff, especially at the organization level. When there's a big vulnerability that comes out, and it's a case of, oh, are we affected by this somewhere? Having that accurate asset inventory across your entire fleet of servers, your cloud environment, being able to quickly go, oh yeah, we've got this component and it's sitting on this app service in Azure, or maybe it's on this server on-prem, especially because the things that software, some people do continuous delivery, but most people don't really do it. And so you'll have, here's the state of the software in our source code repository. The current build says everything's cool, but we haven't deployed that yet. We're actually running an older version of that component in production.
Yeah, I'm also seeing the value then of retrieving SBOMs in the CycloneDX format from the companies you're working, the services that are being provided to you as well. Because when you think about, when a big vulnerability hits the internet, Security Journey, we provide our platform to our customers, right? And we'll get a bunch of emails from people going, "Hey, are you using this particular library?" And there'll be a list of them, and we have a canned response because normally we're not using whatever library was in question there. But I guess if you have an SBOM in the CycloneDX format, if I export that and provide that to you as a component of delivering my service, you can ingest that into your management system. You don't even have to ask me. You're just doing a query of, wherever you're ingesting all the information to be able to say, oh, I know that Security Journey, for example, doesn't use that component because we've searched the SBOMs have been searched, or the assets that are coming out of it.
Yeah, there's a number of good use cases in that respect in terms of sharing it between supplier and consumer, especially, open source software. Often companies might do an internal fork. And so that component might appear to be an old, outdated component, but they could be backporting security fixes for it, things like that. So being able to say to your consumer, hey, we use this component, but we applied this security patch to remediate this vulnerability. Or it could be a case of, yes, we do use this vulnerable component, but we don't call the method that's vulnerable. So, yep, the vulnerability exists, but don't freak out. It's not exploitable. So you can communicate all that sort of information.
So what are people using to collect all that? Like, where are they putting the output of all these SBOMs? Is there like a management system? Are they building custom tooling to represent all of, like, import all of the CycloneDX SBOMs from all of my apps? Do they build like a custom dashboard, or is there like an open source project that lets me wrap all this stuff together?
Yeah, so the OWASP dependency track project is
Okay.
probably the leading SBOM platform out there, but then there's a bunch of different security vendors as well that are integrating this capability in their product.
Okay. Cool. So that's so dependency track, which we've had Steve on before to talk about, Steve Springett, to talk about the project and kind of where it came from. So it ingests the output of CycloneDX running for my JavaScript app, for example, and my Python app, and it ingests all that together and then lets me do queries and determine search for certain things then across my whole fleet.
Yeah, it also lets you export it. So if we're talking about that vulnerability sort of assessment workflow where, all right, we've got a vulnerable component, is it exploitable or not? So dependency track can then generate output to give to your consumers as to the outcome of that, like whether, yes, we are exploitable or no, we're not.
Very cool. Yeah, I'm always so thankful when I think about projects like Dependency Track and the CycloneDX work that's been done here, because you look in the industry and you're like, people are starting companies and selling products that are doing these same things that folks such as yourself are just, sacrificing and putting your time and effort into making these things available. And so I'm always so impressed with folks like yourself and Steve that are, operating behind the scenes. You're doing all this stuff and you're making these things available just to make the world a more secure place. And so I wish I could. I wish I could say thank you on behalf of the whole community. I'm going to do it anyway. Thank you on behalf of the whole community for doing stuff like that, because I know I haven't experienced it, but I know I just have an idea how much time actually goes on behind the scenes into making this happen, and it's not an hour per week, folks. It's these guys are spending a lot more time to make these things possible and make the world a more secure place. So it's a really, really awesome thing that y'all are doing.
Thanks.
So, how did you get involved with this then? With the CycloneDX project?
Yeah, so it was that the job where I became dev lead at an organization, and I was sort of freaking out a bit because I had a look and we had a lot of different custom developed apps and services and integrations, and no visibility across all of those things of the state of them. So I went looking for solutions to this problem, came across dependency track, thought, oh, this looks exactly like what I need. And then, of course, you feed it with CycloneDX. So then started using CycloneDX myself. And there was a couple of features missing that I wanted. So I contributed them, kept contributing. Because I'd recently gone from a development heavy role to a role where I wasn't on the tools anymore, it was sort of a bit of a fun thing to do in the evenings to stay sharp coding. And yeah, went from there.
Very cool. Very cool. So I mentioned kind of towards the top of our conversation that, I got to CycloneDX because I was trying to generate some SBOMs, and I got into it and I was like, wow, there's support for a lot of different frameworks and libraries and things here. And so tell us about the depth and breadth of this CycloneDX tool, like the tooling that goes behind it. Like, what languages are we supporting? What, how wide is this thing?
I can't even remember how many ecosystems we support now. There's heaps like Go, um, .NET, Python, Java, Node. There's just, pretty much any modern popular ecosystem is supported. There's containers. Like you're actually starting to see this stuff be integrated into the native tooling. So Docker's now shipping a command that'll build a SBOM for your Docker images. Go's got really good inbuilt sort of metadata capture that enables a really accurate SBOM. So yeah, it's pretty interesting.
Yeah, it's when I picked it up, I used the I think it was the Node, Go, and Java and Ruby versions just to, and I was like really impressed because I'm like, there's support for all these different things, like all these modern frameworks and stuff have support in this tool. So, any idea how many people actually use CycloneDX today?
We've estimated it at over 100,000 organizations. That's just based on downloads of the different implementations, the different Docker images, uh, things like dependency track, because that's takes CycloneDX. If you're using dependency track, you'll be using CycloneDX. But yeah, it is a bit hard to estimate because we're an open source project. We don't have a customer list or anything like that. So yeah, that's reasonably conservative estimate.
Wow, so it's having a big impact across the industry. Then, I mean, that's a lot of organizations that are using this, and we know at the end of the day, adoption of SBOM is the answer that we've been working towards. And it's, from a vulnerability management perspective, from a, dependency and tracking and management and vulnerabilities from that side, like it is ultimately the answer. And so people need to be incorporating it into whatever that they're doing.
Yeah, it's been quite interesting actually because there's been a lot of work in the US federal government making this happen. Executive order a little while ago. But there's a lot of interest around the world. I'm from Australia. The Australian Cybersecurity Centre recently added it to their ISMS. Something which I thought was a bit of a niche thing is really widespread now.
Yeah, that's great to hear. What do you see as what's next for CycloneDX? Like, do y'all have a roadmap that you're working from, and you're trying to, you've got future releases and stuff, or what is the future of CycloneDX?
Yeah, so probably the two main features that we'll be working on for the next release will be support for AI and machine learning and low code platforms. Yeah, we've got a industry working group, so we meet with them, talk about the challenges different folks are having in different spaces, and yeah, use that to help prioritize what we do next.
So you're somebody who's paying a lot of attention to the software supply chain. How long is it going to take us to get to the point where we get this under control?
Um, that's a really hard question, because if you have a look at any of this stuff, a lot of it's inherently broken, and it's easy to shoot yourself in the foot. So I think it could take quite a while.
So you think a decade? Are we that far away from solving this problem? I hate to declare that, and then it'll end up coming true, and people say he's the person that set us off on the wrong path here. But
I don't think it'll be that long. But it's not going to happen overnight.
Okay, so some less than 10 years, though, we should have this thing under control. And I don't know. They've been saying we're going to solve SQL injection for 20 plus years at this point, and somehow it's still out there.
Yeah, I think it'll be better. I don't think it'll necessarily be gone.
Yeah, I guess as the tooling continues to improve and the solutions for managing these things will, people that are serious about it will adopt it, and at least you'll have more differentiation between those who are taking it seriously and those who are not doing anything, to manage their dependencies and stuff that they have. So if somebody's listening here, and let's say they're a developer, they're a Python developer, that's what they spend their day working on, and they're wondering how to get started. Like, what would you recommend for somebody who's hearing this? They're like, this CycloneDX thing sounds awesome. I want to I want to use it. I want to learn about it. Like, what advice would you give them here as somebody who's really close to the project?
Pretty simple. Just pick a project that you're working on and download the tool for that ecosystem and generate an SBOM. Spin up a local instance of dependency track. It runs in Docker, so it's really easy to just quickly run and try out. And yeah, load your bomb in there and actually have a look at what's in there. You might be surprised. Maybe less surprised if it's ecosystem like NPM, where you're expecting to have a bazillion dependencies come in, even though you've only got a couple of direct dependencies. But
the NPM, like, you're like, but wait, I only added 3 packages. How can I have 25,000 dependencies? How is that possible? And we're only partially joking.
Yeah,
that level of dependencies that get unlocked depending on what packages you add, and it starts to, hey, the Cyclone, I get that now. It's the circular kind of it continues on almost forever and ever too. So what would you, I guess, give us a single call to action here, give us a single key takeaway, something that you want to leave with our audience here?
start looking at the dependencies you're using. Like, even if you don't use CycloneDX, like, start looking at what you're actually shipping in your software, because it might be a third-party component, but it's become part of your software that you're responsible for. You have to pay attention to all of it. You can't ignore what is often the majority of your code.
Yeah, that's great advice, and there's a great place to end this conversation. Is people need to get out and start looking at those dependencies. And so, Patrick, once again, thank you to you for all that you do behind the scenes here to make CycloneDX. I mean, I took it, I used it. I all the efforts that y'all put into this. Like, I had a chance to use it firsthand in the last couple of weeks, and I was really impressed with how it works and how clean it was to interact with. So, thanks for sharing the knowledge about this thing, and I'm hoping a lot of our listeners will go check out CycloneDX and put it into use. You'll find it at the place where you get all your good OWASP stuff.
Thanks, Chris.